Welcome back to Comedy for Life. This is Walt Frasier, your host. I have 30 years of professional improv, sketch, and stand-up comedy, as well as music, theater, TV, a little bit of film here and there as well. Today is all about turning all your ideas in comedy and finding the funny. We've done 3 episodes now, how to get stage time, brainstorming ideas, brainstorming details, and the next 2 or 3 episodes are all going to be about finding the funny, taking all your ideas and crafting them, shaping them, ways of presenting them better, ways of manipulating the material to be better scripts, etc., etc., etc. Today, we're talking mostly about how to present your comedy. Here's the thing. The words are important. What you say will be important at some point, but right now, and in general, the actual words are not as important as how you say the words. The presentation of how you say the words is 93% of the job. In fact, at this point, I hope you've already been on stage at least 2 times, right? Episode 1 was all about finding stage time. You created stage time for yourself, created a plan, a series of open mics. In the course of a week, a comedian can create an amazing 5-minute routine, a brand new 5-minute routine any given week, because they were spending all week 4 or 5 times a day, every single day in the clubs, workshopping new material, from brainstorming ideas, brainstorming details, finding the funny, crafting it, shaping it, to the point where they go back on the road, hitting the colleges, hitting the corporate events, hitting the big clubs that pay the big bucks around the country, around the world, the cruise ships, you name it, TV, if you're lucky, after a point, right? And you've got all this great new material to work with. If you're doing a class or you're doing a show once a week, this is a month-long process. Step 1 is brainstorm ideas. Step 2, brainstorm details. You should already have stage time planned out for your next. And today we're just going to talk about how to shape everything you've done so far into a wonderful, tight comedy routine. One thing I want you to start doing before you get on stage now is outlining your routine. You have all these ideas, you have all these details, you've been on stage a couple times, you get to play a little bit with what works. Now, before you get on stage again, I want you to outline some things. What's the first thing you're going to say? What's the last thing you're going to say? I'm not worried about the order so much, but just have a plan, and it's either going to work or it's not, right? Today, I want to really focus on how you present the material. And as you plug in new things and we manipulate the content in the next couple of weeks, we're going to keep going in this direction, but really talk about today. And in some ways, this is the most important part. And I feel too many comedy schools don't put enough attention onto this. Even a lot of improv comedy schools, they really talk about yes and. They talk about the game. They talk about all these different things, but they don't really teach you how to perform too often. If you went into a lot of these comedy schools as a trained actor from a college program, or with years of stage time as an actor, knowing how to create a character, how to talk and walk and be on stage presence, all those things, then you can go to these comedy schools and learn all these things about improv. But so many people come out of those schools, and I say this as somebody who has auditions every couple months, and people that have done the full program. I'm not going to name names, but pretty much any comedy school in town, they've been through the entire program and they just don't know how to perform, right? Or even worse, they come to the city and say, oh, I'm trained in Meisner. They've even been to college as an actor, and they said they're trained in Meisner, but they have no clue what they're doing on stage, right? Maybe they could go teach Meisner in a class, but they honestly don't know what they're doing on stage or on camera. Today we're going to talk about, though, you have all this material. You're going to get on stage today or tomorrow, sooner than later. And I just want you to start doing these things. 1, attitude. What is your attitude? What's the emotion of your story, right? Probably the most important thing in comedy is the attitude. In fact, I talk to kids and teens when I teach this. I say, all those things your parents and teachers hate, attitude and sass, right? Bring them to the stage. Save it for the stage. Save all that whatever that is, that anger, that frustration, that anxiety, that fear, right? As an actor, as a performer, you don't want to have ego and insecurity holding you back as a performer, but the character of you that is telling a story. If you're anxious when that thing happened that you're talking about, bring that anxiety on stage. Bring that fear, bring that, right? Whatever, if you see my breathing is changing, I'm getting all, right? Bring that. And sometimes it's subtle, depending on your style. I go over the top with it. I take it back and I have to pull back. We'll talk about that in a minute. But bring that attitude. Find places in the story where the attitude, the emotion can change, levels of attitude. Because if you're just screaming the whole time because you're angry, right? When you're doing performing, if you're angry and you're just screaming the whole time, that gets very monotonous. So you want to find levels, find variety of anger. Maybe the anger becomes more sadness because maybe the anger becomes more frustration. Maybe the anger is more anxious. It builds, it pulls back, right? So bring the anxiety. What's the anxiety? What's the emotion of this story? Don't just tell us this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. Don't bore us with stuff. Don't bore us with details. Bring the power of the emotion of that moment. That alone sometimes is enough to grab our attention because you're all of a sudden going to be in it, right? You're going to be feeling it. You're going to be saying these things in a way that you care more about them. And if you care more about them, they will care more about them. It just works that way. If you don't give a crap about the words you're saying, neither will they. Whatever you do, you're there to lead them down the path of your existence, your story, your anger, your fears, your frustrations, your observations, whatever it is. Even if it's, I thought it was hilarious. Let me tell you about this. Oh my God, whatever it is. And then find places where maybe the attitude changes at some point, right? I'll talk about more of that in a second. So attitude. Pacing. A lot of times when I ask people, what's the number one skill in comedy? And almost every time they say timing. So they all know about comic timing being so important. The number one skill in comedy is listening. Listening with your eyes, listening to the audience, listening to yourself, listening to the room. Are you screaming in the mic and it sounds terrible? Are you too quiet? Is the audience getting restless because you've been boring for too long? All that stuff. Listening to the world when you go out into the world, observing with your eyes, listening with your eyes. If you're not listening, you can't have good timing. Over time, you don't have to be actively listening to have good timing. It becomes rudimentary, becomes part of your shtick without even trying. You just a sense of timing. But let's talk about first, pace versus tempo. Tempo is the actual speed of the words. A lot of times my tempo is way too fast. I've actually had 5-year-olds in the middle of a show doing improv comedy, and just the stand-up comedy portion, though, introducing the show, warming up the crowd. Hey, guys, blah, 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 talking about what the show's going to be. Hey, you guys doing? Where you from? Blah, blah, blah. And I've had a 5-year-old tell me, sir, we didn't get anything you just said. We have no clue what you just said. I don't know, right? In a very cute 5-year-old voice. And all of a sudden it's like, oops, let me, okay. You can't freak out at that point. It's like, oh, okay, let me pull back. Let me make sure I'm being understood. Right? Tempo is the actual speed. Pace is the perceived speed, right? You can actually talk in a very comfortable pace and a very comfortable tempo, but because your energy is such and you're not letting it die, you don't have these dead beats in between, the pace is actually pretty good, right? Sometimes the pace is anxious. It's like, oh my God, let me get into Robin Williams. Blah, 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 blah. But even Robin Williams, he'd be then he'd have a pause. The whole thing about comic timing is when to go fast, when to go slow, when to speed up, when to take a pause, right? And we want to mix that up a little bit. We're going to mix that up a lot. Don't be afraid of silence. In jazz music, the rest, the silence is what creates the rhythm, not the words. And certain words have an innate rhythm, right? The beautiful thing about Shakespeare a lot is the rhythm of the actual words. But a lot of times we get so hung up on the words and how we say the words, we forget the silence is what sets up the rhythm, not so much the words. Together, combined, right? And again, like with the attitude, find places where you change up your pace. If you're like me and your normal pace is blah, 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 find moments where pull it back, take a breath, pull back, push, pull, right? not only with rhythm, with pacing, what about with volume? At some point, we want to get louder. We want to wake people up. If you're always loud, though, people can fall asleep. You want to mix it up. I'm at a heavy metal concert. I can fall asleep. I live in New York City. When I'm out in the woods and it's completely quiet, I have a hard time sleeping because it's so quiet. And eventually, when it's always quiet, you'll eventually fall asleep. But then when something happens, you wake up because it changes. In the city, if there's a blackout and everything goes quiet, everybody wakes up. What happened? Right? At a heavy metal concert, I could fall asleep. At a techno Euro music club where it says boom, 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 boom. Even though it's loud, it's driving, eventually that becomes very monotonous and it'll put me to sleep. I think I prefer hip hop or jazz in general, rhythmic music in general, because it's that mixing of the rhythms that keeps me coming back. But even in that, if it's the same 8 beats, a lot of times a lot of music is just tracked and it's that same 8 beats over and over and over again because it's just a loop, that will eventually put me to sleep. A live drummer will mix it up. Every few bars will throw in an extra thing. That'll keep me engaged. So for me, but in general, if you're mixing up the volume, get loud, get soft, you have a microphone. If you have to scream, pull the microphone away. Good mic technique. Think about the singers, the big belters. When they do their big note, they pull the mic back for the big note. Because here, it would split. The technology can't handle it. And it gets ugly, right? Or you want to get really soft, bring it in. Manipulate the microphone, but move up and down the volume spectrum. When you get loud, you get excited, you might need to pull the mic down a little bit. Okay, let me bring him in, right? So volume. Pitch. In music, the pitch is how high or low is the note. So when you got basses are way down, up here you got sopranos, right? Tenors in the middle, altos in the middle somewhere. In your performance, find places where you can bring the pitch down. A lot of times the pitch comes down when you get quiet, right? We're going to get really serious for a minute. Oh my God, let me tell you, I get so excited. Oh my gosh, I almost died in Minnesota, right? I'll talk about more of that in a second. Attitude, rhythm, pacing, volume, and pitch. Play with the shape of your routine. If you're like me and you talk way too fast, way too loud, blah, 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 find places to pull back. If you think you're a deadpan comic, you're probably not. Most people that claim to be deadpan comics are just boring and lazy people. It's like, I don't do all that other stuff. I'm a deadpan comic. No, you're just not interesting, right? There's very few Stephen Wrights in the world. And I say that because if you are a deadpan comic, you got to do everything I'm talking about on the inside. You're just less external with your choices, but you're working. You're on fire on the inside, but on the outside, it's very still. It's less is more. But on the inside, you're thinking, you're on fire. There's so much going on, but it's right here, right? You're that rubber band. I talk about in acting. A lot of acting is like a rubber band pulled back. The potential energy on the inside is huge. But when you're ready to explode, you have it. But you're not fidgeting. You're not nervously, unless your character is nervously moving, right? You're still. You're listening. And you're just that immense amount of energy on the inside. And then when you need to, you can explode and have, when that character's ready to break, right? You have all that pent up energy, right? As a singer, you have all this energy on the inside. If you're too kinetic, you get off the voice. But I'm off the voice. I've been screaming too much doing improv comedy. So stay on the voice, stay in the moment, stay in the pocket, right? But on the inside, there's fire going on. And you just work those things. You can be completely still working on your brainstorming ideas stage, your brainstorming details stage, but catch yourself being the same for too long, loud or soft, fast or slow. You've been angry for too long. I got to mix it up a little bit. Now, one more thing I want to talk about in this episode is how do you make all these changes more natural? You can make conscious decisions that I'm going to slow down or speed up here. I'm going to get louder or softer here. I'm going to change from angry to sad to this here. And a lot of times we're analyzing scripts. We might even in the paragraph in the margins of our Shakespeare, whatever plays you're working on, and say, let's get a little more of this here, let's get more of this way. But here's the way to do it more naturally. Inner monologue. As an actor, well, even more of that. Right now, you're listening to this podcast, hopefully. Anybody still here? 17 minutes later, wherever we're into. While I'm talking, or while you're in a class, while the teacher's talking, while you're at work, while the boss is talking, while you're doing a sales pitch, while the client is talking, or you're on the opposite end of a sales pitch and the salesperson's talking to you, in your head, there is a conversation. There's a monologue going on, right? There's also words, there's thoughts in your head while you're talking. In acting, that's subtext, right? The actual definition of subtext is what's the hidden meaning of the word. So like when you're being sarcastic, the subtext might be opposite. It says, oh yeah, you're really funny. Oh yeah. Clearly, I don't think this person's funny, but I'm saying funny. The subtext is saying the opposite of what I'm saying. In my head, I'm thinking, oh, this guy's, you're an entertaining speaker. I could listen to you for hours. Or passive aggressiveness, right? It says, oh no, you're right. You are so correct, right? That's sarcasm, that's cynicism. The subtext, the inner monologue of your head while you're speaking, the subtext is in conflict. But what's the words while you're not talking? In a dialogue, and as an actor, it's the inner monologue. So what I want you to do is less make conscious decisions about attitude, about timing, about pacing, unless you catch yourself like I do all the time. Oh, let me pull back, right? Instead of making those conscious decisions about technique, have the inner monologue of your story. As an actor, be thinking in the first person of your character, right? If I'm playing a prince that's trying to woo a princess, right? I'm thinking, oh, I love this person, but my father will never approve of me. I played this character, student prince, in college, and I fell in love with a barmaid. And in a class society, my father will never approve of this. I'll never be able to be with this person once I leave college, and I'm not with this person anymore, and I'm going to have to marry that princess. And so, like, there's that anxiety underground, everything. But a lot of times I just don't care. I love this person. I'm going to go against my father and my mother. I'm going to go against the state. I'm going to go against my duty, all this stuff. And then eventually I'm like, society is not going to let me be happy with Kathy, right? The character, Carl Franz, right? So whatever it is. So whatever that inner monologue is, there's the dialogue, there's the text, there's the things you say, the things you sing, but then what's behind it? So what I want you to do, as you're telling your story, visualize these locations. This is why we did the brainstorming details week. We did a whole class on brainstorming ideas, having ideas, and then a lot of other comedy teachers don't talk about this stuff, but they'll bring this stuff in from the acting world. Do that brainstorming details process where you just flushed out everything there is to flush out about the characters, the setting, and what happened in the story. In improv, we call it the who, the where, the what. Get all that stuff out there. And now, as you start to trim and cut back on setup, in your head, you still got all those details. We're not going to say most of the stuff we came up with in the last exercise out loud when we finally narrow this comedy routine down. But all that stuff is in there to help us focus. So, good example. 22 years ago on the national tour for Scarlet Pimpernel, we're on the way to Thunder Bay, Canada, leaving Duluth. And at some point, we almost ended up in Lake Superior because our bus driver was drunk. So when I'm doing the show, I use this more of a crowd work story now. When I'm doing the show and somebody says they're from Minnesota, oh my God, I almost died in Minnesota. And I go right to, we're driving up to Canada, and apparently the bus driver was a really good functioning drunk driver because he was always drunk, apparently. We just learned this later. He was always drunk. But this week, he also had a cold, so he took a little codeine. And apparently, a functioning drunk driver plus codeine means he's asleep and we're going into the lake. So we're all asleep, though. We're going, right? So I'm talking about this story. And a lot of things I don't tell now. Back at the hotel in Duluth, we came out at 8 in the morning to board the bus. There was a woman working out there, a sex worker. I'm imagining the pine forests, imagining this beautiful views. Driving north, the lake's on the right because it's on the east. It's like the Pacific Coast Highway in California, but the water's on the other side of the roads. We end up having this accident because he's drunk driving. I tell this whole story, and I got the story down to about a 30 to 60-second bit, depending on whether I'm using it as a closing bit or as a crowd work thing. I got it down tight, and it's a really fun 30-second story, 60-second story. It's a whole day, but I'm imagining all this stuff involved in that day as I tell that story. So it feeds the anxiety. If I have a relationship to this scene, I'm in a place, I'm visualizing the beauty of it, the fear, the anxiety of almost dying, the weirdness afterwards of like, what just happened, right? The telephone poles type things, these things like this, these wooden things that keep us from going over the lake. We took out 7 out of 8 of them, right? The panel over the right rear tire that ended up in the lake, never to be found. And then we finally drive away and we're at the border and they clear us through American customs. By the time we get to the other side of the border to Canada, they say, oh, they just called. You got to go back. Apparently there's something going on. They need to talk to you. And then he gets arrested on the border. A lot of times I don't even get that far. But all that stuff's in my head as I tell this story. And I keep people engaged another 30 seconds, 60 seconds. There's a 4 or 5 minute version of this I could use for a tight 5 too. But all these different stories. I have a new routine I'm working on that's all about making coffee before having your first cup of coffee. All the things that go around. So I'm just brainstorming all those things. But the exhaustion and the anxiety when you find hot coffee all over the floor because you forgot to put the pot on the machine after you put it on, turned it on. I don't need an alarm now anymore because I have cats now. I get Charlie horses at 4 a.m. for no reason. I have to pee. I fart so loud I wake myself up, right? I'm getting too personal now. But even telling those things, I'm imagining laying in bed and waking up and the cat tapping me on the hand, right? So bring all these things in, bring the inner monologue in, bring in the subtext, start catching yourself being monotonous at the same volume, the same pace, even the same attitude. Bring the attitude and then catch yourself being the same for too long. Over the course of a 5-minute routine, you've probably changed attitudes 2 or 3 times. You've sped up, you've slowed down. You got louder, you got softer. You got really excited. You got very deep and serious, right? Have some fun. This has been Comedy for Life, the podcast. My name is Walter Frasier. Go down below if you're having fun. Check us out. I've got shows in New York City, everywhere. Sign up for my mailing list. Add your name to the list. Get a free class. Get some free tickets. Anybody that puts your name on the list, I have at least 2 free tickets waiting for you. The first class is on me. Come check us out. My job in life, my mission in life is to spread joy and laughter, one show at a time, one class at a time. Corporate events, murder mysteries, improv shows, stand-up comedy shows, classes, summer comedy camp, right? We've got a lot of fun stuff planned. And we've been doing this for 22 years in Times Square, touring DC to Boston. We're having a lot of fun. I want to spread that joy and laughter. And come join us for a class or a show sometime. Hey guys, we'll see you guys soon. We'll see you at the next episode.